and we have a special interview with former Commissioner of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Gary Griffith. Gary, thank you so much for joining us. Can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly. Good evening.
What made you decide at an early point in your life, literally right out of St. Mary's College, to go into the military?
My lifestyle has always been one of a degree of discipline, structure, and above all, just trying to help others. Even whilst I was at school, I always will be seen as that person trying to defend persons who are being attacked by bullies. So throughout my whole life, and that's why after spending 17 years in the military, being a national security advisor, Minister of National Security, Commissioner of Police, I always see that my role and function is always to help others who need support. That's why I spend most of my time as Minister of National Security and Commissioner of Police, dealing with those persons who need protection, whether it is law-abiding citizens from criminal elements, elderly persons, children, from abuse, ladies from being attacked, even animals. So that has always been my life, to be there to defend those who need to be defended.
So I'm going to repeat that question for you that I started with. What was one of the most challenging facets of public service and public life for you? And when you look back, what was one of the easiest things that you took a lot of joy in accomplishing while you were in service?
The most difficult was trying to change the culture. We have culture change in Trinidad and Tobago. It is very difficult. We have this pattern that it has always been like this, so let us keep it that way. So when I was Minister of National Security and definitely Commissioner of Police, trying to transform the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service into one of being made accountable, measuring their performance, using technology to ascertain what it is they're doing, there was fight back, a lot of fight back, because police officers would be, some of them would be accustomed to signing and saying that they were working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 30 days a month, and getting 10 times more than they should be getting by stating that they're working overtime. Having police vehicles not patrolling where they're supposed to be, not reporting to a crime scene, not attending court. So trying to change that culture, not by force, but by influencing individuals to understand the significance and the importance of their job. It took a while, and it was a fight back I got, more so from the senior officers. The British government they brought experts and they did polls, and I think 93% of the second division police officers, they were in support of what I was doing. But only about 40 or 50% of the first division officers were comfortable because they were accustomed to that style of just come to work, do what you have to do, which is what we have returned to since I left. But by and large, before my departure, that is where the pleasure I got is by being able to get people to understand the importance of it. And that's where citizens started feeling comfortable with the police. Citizens started giving information through app reporting, online reporting, police officers going out of their way where during the COVID pandemic, not one police officer went absent, not one abused his authority, in contrast to what we've seen all around the world. And so that was the pleasure that I got. So there was the fighting down the culture change where there was a big fight down even by politicians. But then the pleasure I got is by persons actually accepting the facts and the need for us to have that transformation.
You talk a lot about culture change and changing perceptions and changing expectations. Where do you think we are now with regard to understanding the use, the introduction, the efficacy of the police force in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, definitely, just by what you said there, to try to change it from being perceived as it being a force, but that of a service. So it's not the Trinidad and Tobago Police Force, but the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And that was important because you will be getting numerous reports of abuse of authority by police officers, persons believing that the police officers are there to frustrate them, to harass them, to intimidate them. And trying to get that transformed, it took a while. But I put systems in place to measure their performance, make them accountable, and that is where citizens started to believe in it. So it can change. It is possible. However, if it is you don't put the policies and the systems in place, you're going to go back to what we have now, where someone could be shot in their head. And just opposite, on the other side of the road, 12 seconds away is the commissioner's residence, and 2 minutes away is the St. James Police Station, and the police will arrive 30 minutes later. And it is no fault of the police officers. It is because of certain persons who are afraid to embrace change, who are afraid to understand the type of technology that is provided. The reason I was able to get all of this was because for the first time ever, I got the Trans-Tobago Police Service to sign an agreement with the NYPD. And with that, the NYPD started giving me so much information, such as the establishment of a social media unit, bringing officers to Trinidad and Tobago to train, proper training, customer service training, and so forth. And that took a while, but unfortunately, that is always a problem. If you have a culture, a certain angle that you go at, and you make a major cultural change, if that person does not, if I leave, it was hoped that it will stay. Every single thing that I put to transform the Trans-Tobago Police Service has been pulled down, dismantled, shut down, because people didn't want that. Some people, they bask in the corruption, they bask in the incompetence, they don't feel the need to have to do something. So trying to reignite that pride, it requires one word, proper leadership. Well, two words, proper leadership.
When you talk about leadership, we understand, of course, as you said, there was a lot of pushback with a lot of the changes that you wanted to make. Do you think that sometimes we have, for example, in the police service, we have too much leadership and not enough of people on the ground level giving us an idea, look, this is what's working, this is what isn't working? How is the police service structured so that the officers feel empowered to actually say to their superiors and their leaders, here is what isn't working, we need to do better? How do you give us the tools to do better?
The only way that can happen, and it should happen even with politics, it should happen even with a business. The way my training was is that I'm never prepared to have those persons under my command do something that I'm not prepared to do myself. Leadership by example, which is why on many occasions I spend most of my time on the ground, in the streets, in the police stations, meeting the police officers, understanding their needs, looking at their concerns, seeing what is required. That is the only way it could be done. I think I've been the only police commissioner that visited every single police station, the only commissioner of police in the last few decades that will actually be involved in operations and at the front line. Because you can't expect to lead an organization, especially when it comes to law enforcement, and you're there in a Gabardine uniform in an air-conditioned office high up in the 6th floor of the police admin building, whilst you have the men out in the street with shots being fired. When you do that, it builds a degree of trust, it builds a degree of confidence, it gets those under your command to be prepared to follow you and to listen to you and to believe in you. If you don't do that, and you cut off that line between the hierarchy to those officers who are on the ground, which is basically 90% of the police service, you're going to get disunity, you're going to get lack of motivation, a decrease in morale, and those in the higher echelon not understanding what is required. May I add, however, additionally, many of the junior police officers understood what was required. So when I started pushing systems such as technology, which for the first time ensured that we put an end to kidnapping in Trinidad and Tobago, because the systems we put in place was the first time we were actually arresting persons whilst they had kidnapped victims, breaking into the door, breaking doors, getting into the places, intercepting them on vehicles, and the criminals did not know the type of technology that we use. It put an end to home invasion as well, because there's something in Trinidad and Tobago a few moments later, and people actually wanted to know how it is that we could be able to pinpoint target criminal elements. You come out on a video with a firearm, within a few hours, I will find you. And it had to do, thankfully, to the NYPD, thankfully to me embracing and understanding technology, putting systems such as the National Operations Center, the Commissioner's Command Center, the Operational Command Center, GPS tracking on police vehicles, measuring their performance, looking at their speed, making sure they stay in their area of responsibility. All of these things would have been part of the transformation. The junior officers appreciated it because they realized the public started believing in them. And by doing that, it lifted the morale, it increased public trust and confidence, which was 14% when I became commissioner. When I left, it went to 55%. It's probably back down to 14% now. And that is what is required. But if you have persons that you make as commissioners of police based on political preference rather than competence, we're going to go back to square one.
Gary, suppose the government now was to say to you, we in hindsight, understand a lot of what you were doing, and we understand the direction you were going, and we understand some of the unpopular decisions that you felt that you had to make. And they said, we think we'd like you to give it another try. What would your response be?
Been there, done that. This is not my first rodeo serving my country. Now I have to move for something at another level. You see, being a politician, it assists you in drafting policies. And when I was a politician as the Minister of National Security in that period, under the People's Partnership government, it was the highest reduction in serious crime in 30 years. But I had problems in trying to operationalize the things because as the minister, I'm trying to get the then Commissioner of Police to do something. And poor lad, he just didn't understand. He didn't understand. His everything was blame society, blame the community, blame the politicians. We need prayers. The present commissioner, she's copied exactly what he did. So that element, that is why I became the Commissioner of Police, to operationalize the things based on the policy that I drafted. Now, it is not just the police service that needs transformation, it is the whole public service that needs transformation. And the only way I can do that is not to return as the Commissioner of Police, but to be in a position in government to be able to transform every aspect, every arm of the public service. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service was seen as the least trusted, the most incompetent, the most corrupt. And it's no fault of the officers. It was because of poor leadership. If I was able to transform that into being the most trusted, the most efficient, the most liked after 3 years, and it had nothing to do with Gary Griffith. It had to do with me understanding the importance of being a team player. I was able to handpick some of the best persons involved in technology, human resource, administration, finance, marketing, communication, operations, tactics, and getting all of them together. The criminal elements didn't know what was happening. That's where you got a few moments later. So that is what I intend to do. The same way I was able to transform the police service, I will utilize those same principles of good leadership, good management, measurement of performance, and accountability. And using those 4 principles, we will be able to transform every arm of the public service. And that is what we don't have in Trinidad and Tobago. We don't have systems for accountability. We do not measure performance. There is poor leadership and there's poor management. So the same principles I use to transform the police service, I will do the same thing throughout every arm in the public service.
So, Gary, is this you throwing the gauntlet down to look at another office in Trinidad and Tobago, something that might be closer to higher leadership?
Well, I mean, I am the political leader of a party that is part of an alliance that just comprehensively annihilated the PNM in the last local government election. And it showed the importance of that bridge constituency. It was known as the ONR in 1981. It then became the NAR in 91. It then became the Congress of the People in 2007. It is now the National Transformation Alliance. And it will always comprise that 150,000 odd persons where we may not have the numerical superiority to win government. But with us, other political parties working with us, there's 100% assurance that we will win an election, which is what happened in 1986 under the NAR, in 1995, and also in 2010. Anytime it is that third political party joins forces with the main opposition party to the PNM is defeated 100% of the time. Anytime that third party goes on their own, it expands the gap of success for the PNM, which would have been in 1981 general election, 1991, and 2007. So what we intend to do is to do exactly that, and the local government election showed that. There was a 60,000 difference of 190,000 votes for the UNC and the NTA combined in votes compared to the PNM's 130, and that was a 30% voter turnout. A general election is usually a 60% voter turnout. You multiply both by 2, trying to get the average. So you'll get 260,000 voting for the PNM still. And then you get 380,000 voting for the Alliance, which is 120,000 difference. Guess how many votes there was a difference in the 2010 general election? 120,000. So the pattern remains. So it is guaranteed that this goes according to plan. The NTA, which is the party I lead, working hand in hand with major opposition parties, we would be in government come 2025 or before.
Okay, folks, you've heard it here. 2025 is the expectation that Gary Griffith has set for his party to be in power. let me ask you something about coalition governments. A lot of people feel coalition governments work when um, everyone gets together to get rid of that one common enemy. And then they get into power, and then there's a fracture and a splinter. We've seen around the world a lot of coalition governments work really, really well. How do you think in Trinidad and Tobago you could get your coalition to move forward in a way that would be different to how it was done in the past and actually work better?
Yeah, sure. Excellent question. And as you mentioned, as you rightfully stated, there have been over 80 countries in the world, almost half, at least more than, definitely more than a third, that have coalition governments or presently still have coalition governments. Many have worked, some have not worked. Likewise, many governments have stayed on their own and they have worked and they have not worked. The present situation here in Trinidad and Tobago shows that it is undoubtedly seen as the worst government ever seen in Trinidad and Tobago, and they are not a coalition government. So the perception of people just automatically painted a broad brush to say coalition governments don't work. All you have to do is exactly as you said. You look worldwide, there are dozens of countries right now, developed countries, that have coalition governments, and it works. I think what happened in the past in Trinidad and Tobago, which is what I give the assurance to the country we are not going to see a repeat of, is you cannot have political marriages of convenience. When you have that, and you rush in there to immediately try to find an avenue just to win an election, there's not going to be a proper foundation. And that is what happened in 2010. That's what I would like to because I was there. The PNM called a snap election. They realized that the UNC and the COP, they were having joint political meetings. Patrick Manning, in a very wise manner, decided to rush in there before it became something established. And because of that, there was a 2-month period, roughly, or roughly 6 weeks, to try to mesh something together. There was that marriage of convenience known as the Faizabad Accord, I think it was. And because of that, if you did not have that proper foundation, that is where you will have issues. This time around, and again, likewise, people try to blame the UNC for the failure. I was there, and there were many things that I would have seen of the leadership and the hierarchy of the COP that caused it to collapse. You can't get into government and not remember the importance of you representing those persons who put you there. If it is you don't stand firm on certain things, and it is not of you trying to be disrespectful to the other political parties, but have a voice. And with that, so it is not about trying to cause issues, but there were certain things that could and should have been done that did not take place. The difference, however, is that with Winston Dukaran and Kamala Prasad-Bisesa, I don't think there was that type of proper relationship, the dialogue between both individuals. Unlike now, with Kamala Prasad-Bisesa and myself, since even when I was a commissioner of police, there was constant dialogue. I had dialogue with her in her capacity as the opposition leader, which is what a commissioner of police is supposed to do. Now that I'm a political leader, we communicate several times a day. So we are going to make sure that there's a proper foundation to ensure that both political parties will respect each other, and that degree of respect has a very big part to play in trying to make sure that the gap is bridged between both political parties. It's not a matter of us and them. And because when that happens, there's not going to be a proper foundation. That is what may cause the collapse or the disintegration of an alliance of political parties. I give the assurance that what we are going to set up is not a marriage of convenience, or just you pick seats, we pick seats, and we just team up. That is not going to work. It has to be a proper framework. And the country is going to see it over the next few months. They're going to be hearing certain things, certain principles, systems that will be there for them to understand that this is not going to be a repeat of the past. And the assurance that what we intend to do is get the best minds available to ensure we have the best government this country would have ever seen.
Everything you're saying sounds almost perfect. How do you get the electorate to understand that they do not just show up for that once every 4-year election, but they participate in local elections, in county council elections, in understanding that the person that represents them is not the person in the Red House, but the county council, the city council person? How are you going to get the electorate to get involved in voting way past beyond every 4 years?
Right. Well, okay. So the first thing So we have local government elections, which would have been every 3 years and may change to 4. But then we have the general election, which, unlike the United States, it's every 5 years. So the general election, but the difference, it's not much difference that you have in Trinidad and Tobago. Some people criticize us by stating that our voter turnout is very low. But basically, if you look at other countries, like in the United States, for example, your voter turnout, the voter turnout in the United States for selection of an election of a president would be almost on par with us in a general election, between 60 to 65, 70%. So it's almost the same. Your equivalent to what we'll have in local government election, our voter turnout is usually around 35%. I think it may just be about the same as well. And when you look at the ratio towards many other countries in the world, it is about the same. So it's a natural thing that you will get where the diehard supporters, whether it's Republicans, whether it's UNC, whether it's Democrats, whether it's PNM, whatever, the diehard foundation members, the base supporters, they will turn out for that, what is known as a local government election. That's where you'll get that 30 to 35% turnout. When you move up to 60%, that is where you get that 150,000 of the third constituency, the NTA, COP, NAR, ONR type voters who are not PNM or UNC till they die, but they know the importance and they make the decision not based on the party card or the color of the political party. Pardon?
No, I say they can swing the votes.
They are the voters and they do based on logic, based on analyzing the situation. So said they want me to return as commissioner, or they had no issues with me being commissioner of police. I think that was the first biggest concern that the prime minister had, because he had a 40% national support. I had closer to 70 plus, with 89% having no concern or wanting me to return. And by that percentage showed that that included the vast majority, probably 90% of the PNM voters. As soon as Keith Rowley decided to say he doesn't like Gary Griffith, 100,000 plus automatically stopped liking me. And that, I mean, it reminds me of so much of one of my favorite places I love to go in North America is Orlando. When I go to SeaWorld, you know, those train seals that they just clap. And that is what happened. Yeah. So Keith Rowley says Gary Griffith is the best thing, and everybody in the PNM supports that. As soon as he says, I don't like Gary Griffith again, you get about 70% sitting here. Okay, well, I don't like him anymore. If he makes a statement now and say, you know, in hindsight, I made a mistake. I was badly advised by certain persons who are ministers who were just intimidated by Gary Griffith, and we realized that we need him back. 90% of those people who don't like me yesterday would like me today. And that is a sad indication of where we are as a country. It means that you can blindly follow someone based on the fact of what he or she says, because that is your political party. When you do that, that can't protect you. That doesn't protect your wife from being murdered, your daughter from being raped, your son from being kidnapped, your assets from being lost, improving the economy, the health, the education, social development of a country. Blindly following political parties is what has caused the collapse of a country, because you're not actually looking and analyzing and saying, is he or she, is what they are doing, is it towards the benefit of me, my family, my country? Is it, if I am God-fearing, is what he or she doing really good towards me being a religious person, regardless of your religious affiliation? Is that the right thing to do? Is it the godly thing to do? You forget all of that because I'm a PNM or whatever till I die. And that is what I am trying to bring out to persons in Trinidad and Tobago. Forget about the party card. That is not going to help you. And then after you complain for the next 5 years, and then you go back into the polling booth, when you do that, that 150,000 of the third constituency supporters can move to 200,000. And that is what we intend to do. We intend to make sure that get persons to stop being just like, not you know, there's people, but there's sometimes there's sheeple, but they're like sheep, and they just want to blindly follow a political leader. We are here to show, not to attack and demonize the PNM. The PNM has been a very good party. They have done a lot towards the development of Trinidad and Tobago. It is the political leadership of the PNM at this time that needs to be taught a lesson, and a loud and clear message must be sent to them.
Tobago. Gary, before we went to break, you mentioned something about being liked, about being the favorite, about then falling out of favor and turning that around. Two pivotal election times here in the US was when Bill Clinton won. He partnered with MTV and they did the Rock the Vote, which was at the time having baby steps with its progress. And then when they partnered with them, he was in the White House easily. When Obama won the first term around, he was one of the first political leaders to really, really harness the power of social media to reach not just the people that he needed funding from, but to the man on the street that looks at his phone every 5 minutes to figure out what's going on in the world. What's one of the main strategies before we wrap up? Because I'm getting, this is going great, so we have to do this again. What are one of the main strategies you intend to use, your party intends to use, to get you to that place where you could start making the changes, where your party could start making the changes in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago?
Yeah, well, no, definitely. You are correct, but let us not believe that social media is one that people will just blindly support anyone. I mean, like, for example, someone who actually worked with me in communication when I was, I think, Minister of National Security in that government, Philip Alexander, he has a political party, PEP, and he lives on social media. And I think here he went up for 60 seats, and I think he lost his deposits and everyone. So as much as he's the social media king, what you put out is how people are going to accept it. And when it is that every single comment he made was full of hate, bitterness, attacking everyone, discredited everyone. The country is fed up of that type of politics. You would have seen it with the present Prime Minister as well. And that's where we intend to spend more time not trying to speak about the ills of the other side, but trying to show what we can do to change. We intend to have a roadmap, not this manifesto with all of these fancy promises that 95% will never be delivered because you never did a proper foundation and a proper framework in any ministry. In fact, 70% of the ministers in Trinidad and Tobago are usually appointed after the election, and they never even knew that they were going to be appointed. So they didn't even have some time to ascertain what I intend to do. So you make this man Minister of National Security, you make this person Minister of Health, make this person Minister of Finance. They never knew in advance this was going to be my position. And then he starts rushing there, and you're trying to cut and paste. And that is why many ministries and ministers have failed. So we intend to have a proper roadmap towards the transformation of Trinidad and Tobago, a massive communication campaign to show to the country how we intend to transform every element, whether it's not just national security, but health, education, finance, the economy, things such as sport, for example. The Ministry of Sport has always been seen as a secondary ministry by most governments in Trinidad and Tobago. I intend to push this as a major ministry to transform Trinidad and Tobago, because sport I see as a major avenue to transform the minds of young persons, which brings me into that other point with social media. In the polls conducted by myself, by the media in Trinidad and Tobago, where it stated that 70% I had 70% national support and 89% wanted me to return or had no concern in returning. The majority of when we broke it down, the major support base I have would be the younger voters. So many of the persons that would be the persons over 60 and stuff, they have already been set in their ways. It's not saying that many have changed. Trust me, many have changed. But the bulk of the support that I have would be those individuals who are I would say under 35, 40, which will still be seen as young politically. And I'll tell you why. The last time there was a third constituency for persons to vote and to be in a supporter party other than the PNM or UNC would have been the COP in 2007. So you're talking about 16 years ago. So those persons who are now 33 to 35, they really never had any other choice. So from 18 to 35, that is where we intend to put a lot of emphasis on those young persons who have not yet been politically manipulated. Because what usually happens here in your home, and you said it's the PNM or UNC home. Now, because of social media and technology, young persons are not being easily blinded or manipulated by their parents to say, this is a PNM or UNC house. In fact, young persons are now changing and trying to educate their parents in that type of old-time thinking. It is no longer there. So that is what we intend to do. And I think by and large, John, just my final point on this is that what the country has seen now is what I refer to it as democratic dictatorship. In most countries in the world, if you have a president that did not adhere to the law, which was supposed to have followed a merit list, and she refused, it meant that she did not adhere to the law. She would have been removed immediately. When you have a prime minister going to president's house to use it as a meeting point with the head of an independent institution, There would have been a call for an election. When he takes a piece of paper and gives it to her, and it is signed by a civilian who's one of 1.4 million, and he uses a civilian's personal view, not an official report, as an excuse to try to, that gets the head of the Police Service Commission to not adhere to the law. That would, of course, a government to collapse. When the head of the Police Service Commission breaks the law, she broke the law because she decided to try to suspend a certain commissioner of police and also return the merit list without the approval of the Police Service Commission. There would have been a call for an election. When the whole Police Service Commission, they've resigned in disgust because of the political influence and manipulation by the Prime Minister and the inappropriate, unethical actions of the Police Service Commission chairman, there would have been a call for an election. When we have situations that I have seen for myself as by whistleblowers showing that the phones of political opponents of the government, their phones are being illegally intercepted, there would be called for an election. You would have heard what happened recently with the FIU, when this body is supposed to only look into the accounts of persons if there's a trigger, if there's a red flag, an investigation, nothing. And they decided to go and dig up into the accounts of dozens of persons who may be seen as opponents to the government. They would have been called for an election. When you have a prime minister who handpicks civilians, calls them investigators, pays them millions of dollars, they then write up a report that has no evidence, no witnesses, but it is just to discredit political opponents. And the prime minister then tries to hide like a coward to go into parliament to read it out, because parliament is the one place that you can lie and not be sued. And then the court had to state that you cannot do that. They would have been called for an election. So I think younger persons are seeing what is happening, what is known as democratic dictatorship. And that is why I intend to take that fight, to lead that battle, to ensure that those persons who need proper representation, and to ensure that we have good government, transparent government, a government that intends to work and work hard, and not what is in it for them, but for citizens of this country, you're going to see that positive change come 2025.
Thank you very, very much, Gary.
My pleasure.